Happy Tuesday, Kipsters! I'm so excited that you clicked play. You're getting one of your check marks on your checklist done today. I was so excited to see how many of you did 20 minutes of Lexi and ST Math yesterday, how many of you read 2 books on Raz Kids yesterday. So let's do the same exact thing today. Let's grow our brains and get ready for second grade. Okay, Kipsters, today we're once again looking at words that appeal to our senses. It's been a couple weeks since we've looked at this chart, so let's just review. Remember, our senses are touch, hearing, taste, seeing, and smelling. So when we read our books, we are looking for words that appeal to our senses, right? We're looking for words that give us a better sense of what's happening in the story by telling how something looks, sounds, tastes, feels, or smells, right? Authors use these sense words to help readers form a picture in their mind, and that helps them understand the story a little bit better. So let's take a look back at Brave Irene. I'm going to reread a page, and I'm going to point out some sense words that I noticed. So as I'm reading, try to form an image in your mind of what's happening. There's a really nice image on the page itself that's going to help us, but the words are going to give us a much better sense of what's going on in the story. Okay. By the middle of the pasture, the flakes were falling thicker. Now the wind drove Irene along so rudely she had to hop, skip, and go helter-skeltering over the knobby ground. Cold snow sifted into her boots and chilled her feet. She pushed out her lip and hurried on. This was an important errand. Wow, Kipsters, the specific sense words that the author used on this page helped me get a much better idea of Irene's experience. I noticed so many different sense words on this page. For example, the flakes were falling thicker. That tells me what the snowflakes looked like, right? They were really, really thick. They were falling thicker and thicker on the ground. Knobby ground. That tells me how the ground felt, right? Knobby means kind of bumpy. The ground was bumpy. She was tripping over it. She was flying all around. So that gives me a better sense of how the ground felt on her feet. And then it says the cold snow chilled her feet. So cold and chilled, once again, give me a really good sense of how that snow felt on her body. So, Kipsters, again, these specific sense words give me such a better idea of what's going on in the story. They help me form that picture in my mind. They help me feel like I'm Irene experiencing this event, this snowstorm with her. So they help us understand the text better. And it tells me that her journey was cold, it was difficult, and it was dangerous. These words give me a much better sense of what Irene was going through without the author having to come right out and say it. Okay, Kipsters. I am so excited because today we start a brand new book. We're going to be reading the first chapter of The Wizard of Oz. There are a lot of sense words in this book, so I want you to see if you can form a picture in your mind on each page. All right, let's get started. So Kipsters, as we read this chapter today, I want you to notice not just the sense words and how they help you form a picture in your mind, but also think about how those words help you better understand the story. So just like we did with Brave Irene, or the sense words helped us understand that her journey was cold and dangerous and difficult, think about how the words in this chapter describe the journey that Dorothy is about to go on in The Wizard of Oz. All right, follow along with me. Chapter 1, The Cyclone. Dorothy lived in the midst of the great Kansas prairies with Uncle Henry, who was a farmer, and Aunt Em, who was the farmer's wife. Their house was small, for the lumber to build it had to be carried by wagon many miles. There were 4 walls, a floor, and a roof, which made one room, and this room contained a rusty-looking cooking stove, a cupboard for the dishes, a table, 3 or 4 chairs, and the beds. Uncle Henry and Aunt Em had a big bed in one corner, and Dorothy had a little bed in another corner. There was no garret at all, and no cellar, except a small hole dug in the ground called a cyclone cellar. where the family could go in case one of those great whirlwinds arose, mighty enough to crush any building in its path. I'm going to pause there for a second. So, a cyclone, Kipsters, we read about them actually a few weeks ago. A cyclone is another name for a tornado. Let's keep reading. I'm right here. It was reached by a trap door in the middle of the floor, from which a ladder led down into the small, dark hole. When Dorothy stood in the doorway and looked around, she could see nothing but the great gray prairie on every side. Not a tree nor a house broke the broad sweep of flat country that reached the edge of the sky in all directions. Pause. So, Kipsters, the prairie is it's where she lives. So when I'm reading the word prairie, that's talking about a flat piece of land. So picture no hills, no mountains, no buildings. It's just flat land every direction. Let's keep reading. I am right here. The sun had baked the plowed land into a gray mass with little cracks running through it. Even the grass was not green, for the sun had burned the tops of the long blades until they were the same gray color to be seen everywhere. Once the house had been painted, but the sun blistered the paint and the rains washed it away, and now the house was as dull and gray as everything else. When Aunt Em came to live there, she was a young, pretty wife. The sun and wind had changed her, too. They had taken the sparkle from her eyes and left them a sober gray. They had taken the red from her cheeks and lips, and they were gray also. She was thin and gaunt, and never smiled now. When Dorothy, who was an orphan, first came to her, Aunt Em had been so startled by the child's laughter that she would scream and press her hand upon her heart whenever Dorothy's merry voice reached her ears. And she still looked at the little girl with wonder that she could find anything to laugh at. Uncle Henry never laughed. He worked hard from morning till night and did not know what joy was. He was gray also, from his long beard to his rough boots, and he looked stern and solemn and rarely spoke. It was Toto that made Dorothy laugh and saved her from growing as gray as her other surroundings. Toto was not gray. He was a little black dog with long silky hair and small black eyes that twinkled merrily on either side of his funny wee nose. Toto played all day long, and Dorothy played with him and loved him dearly. Today, however, they were not playing. Uncle Henry sat upon the doorstep and looked anxiously at the sky, which was even grayer than usual. Dorothy stood in the door with Toto in her arms and looked at the sky, too. Aunt Em was washing the dishes. From the far north, they heard a low wail on the wind, and Uncle Henry and Dorothy could see where the long grass bowed in waves before the coming storm. There now came a sharp whistling in the air from the south, and as they turned their eyes that way, they saw ripples in the grass coming from that direction also. Suddenly, Uncle Henry stood up. "There's a cyclone coming, Em," he called to his wife. "I'll go look after the stock." Then he ran towards the sheds where the cows and horses were kept. Aunt Em dropped her work and came to the door. One glance told her of the danger close at hand. "Quick, Dorothy," she screamed, "run for the cellar." Toto jumped out of Dorothy's arms and hid under the bed, and the girls started to get him. Aunt Em, badly frightened, threw open the trap door in the floor and climbed down the ladder into the small, dark hole. Dorothy caught Toto at last and started to follow her aunt. When she was halfway across the room, there came a great shriek from the wind, and the house shook so hard that she lost her footing and sat down suddenly upon the floor. A strange thing then happened. The house whirled around 2 or 3 times and rose slowly through the air. Dorothy felt as if she were going up in a balloon. The north and south winds met where the house stood and made it the exact center of the cyclone. In the middle of a cyclone, the air is generally still, but the great pressure of the wind on every side of the house raised it up higher and higher until it was at the very top of the cyclone, and there it remained and was carried miles and miles away as easily as you could carry a feather. It was very dark, and the wind howled horribly around her, but Dorothy found she was riding quite easily. After the first few whirls around, and one other time when the house tipped badly, she felt as if she were being rocked gently, like a baby in a cradle. Toto did not like it. He ran about the room, now here, now there, barking loudly. But Dorothy sat quite still on the floor and waited to see what would happen. Once Toto got too near the open trap door and fell in, and at first the little girl thought she had lost him. But soon she saw one of his ears sticking up through the hole, for the strong pressure of the air was keeping him up so that he could not fall. She crept to the hole, caught Toto by the ear, and dragged him into the room again, afterward closing the trap door so that no more accidents could happen. Hour after hour passed away, and slowly Dorothy got over her fright. But she felt quite lonely, and the wind shrieked so loudly all about her that she nearly became deaf. At first, she had wondered if she would be dashed to pieces when the house fell again. But as the hours passed and nothing terrible happened, she stopped worrying and resolved to wait calmly and see what the future would bring. At last, she crawled over the swaying floor to her bed and lay down upon it, and Toto followed and lay down beside her. In spite of the swaying of the house and the wailing of the wind, Dorothy soon closed her eyes and fell fast asleep. Okay, Kipsters, that was a long chapter. It was filled with so many sense words, so many kind of complicated words too, but you did a great job listening along with me. I've got just a couple of questions to help us make sense of some of these sense words. Okay, let's go back to when the author was describing the prairie that Dorothy lived in. So remember that the prairie is the flat piece of land where they lived. Does the author make the prairie seem like a nice place to live? Does he make it seem like a nice place to live? I would say no, right? What text details tell you that? I'll give you one. So it says that the sun had burned the tops of the blades. So the sun had burned the tops of the blades of grass, right? So the burn tells me how it feels, how it looks, right? They look burnt and singed, right? No color in them at all. What's another sentence or phrase that the author uses that tells you that the prairie is probably not that nice of a place to live? How else does he describe it? Yeah, I heard someone say the same gray color, right? Everything is gray. There's no color here at all. The same gray color could be seen everywhere. That doesn't sound like a very nice place to live either. I'll take one more suggestion. How does this make Aunt Em feel or look, right? The author does a good job describing her and how she feels in relation to the prairie. Yeah, so if you look down here, it says the sun and wind had changed her too. They had taken the sparkle from her eyes and left them a sober gray. So many sense words in that couple sentences, Kipsters, that tell me just how she looks, right? There's no color anywhere. The grass has been burned. The color, the sparkle has left her eyes, right? It sounds like a very, very sad and lonely place to live. Okay, let's skip ahead to when the storm arrives. So what kind of storm arrives? What kind of storm do they have to face? Exactly, it's a cyclone, which is another word for a tornado. And it picks up the whole house with Dorothy in it and is spinning her around and around. So before the cyclone does that, before it picks up the house, the author describes it, right? He describes how it looks as they're waiting and watching because they're noticing that it sort of seems like something is off. It seems like a storm might be coming. The author does a really good job describing that the tornado is dangerous. So how does the author show in the words that the tornado that's coming is dangerous? What sense words does the author use? Yeah, so up here, a low wail on the wind, that tells you how it sounds. What else? The grass bowed in waves, good. That shows you how the grass looks. Yeah, a sharp whistling in the air. Another phrase that tells you how it sounds. There was one phrase that they said a few different times about how the tornado sounded. Do you remember what that word was? It was a really good sense word for how the tornado sounded. Yeah, it shrieked. They used the word shrieked over and over again. That definitely sounds dangerous to me. So the author did a great job using all of these sense words to give us an idea that the tornado was dangerous. We knew before it even picked up the house and carried Dorothy away that it was bringing a lot of danger. Nice job, Kipsters. All right, so now it's your turn. In this chapter, the author describes Dorothy's home using a lot of sense words. I want you to describe your home using at least 3 sense words. Send that to your teacher so that they can check your work. I cannot wait to see what you come up with, and I will see you, Kipsters, tomorrow. Bye.